with this week's episode of the Influential Women of Beverly Hills. Today we have Isabel Hacker, who is a member on our Beverly Hills Board of Education. She ran in 2015 and was elected onto the board in November of 2015. So I have a couple questions for you today.
Thank you, Sophia, for having me.
Thank you so much for joining the show.
Of course.
So how long have you lived in the Beverly Hills community?
So I've lived here since 2006. When my husband went to school here, he went through Horace Mann, graduated in Beverly Hills High School.
That's so nice.
So he's been here much longer than I have.
Yeah, well, it's really great that you've joined the Board of Education, the board, and just like really immersed yourself into our community, having not lived here your whole life.
Right.
So I know that you were on the Horace Mann's Site Council.
I was actually at Hawthorne's Site Council. I was at Horace Mann's PTA and Hawthorne's PTA, as well as the Citizens Oversight Committee.
Okay, I see. So after doing that, is that what led you to want to join the board?
So it was a series of different things that led me to make that decision. Like many in our district, I really love our schools and really want our schools to just do better. I think we believe that we can do better, and it's not to say that we're not in a good place, but I think we can definitely make better choices and pull together to better the district. And so I thought about a lot of things. It was a big decision for me to make, and so it was a decision that I finally decided to take and just go and run.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like it was definitely an exciting leap to take, and
it was a lot. It is exciting, but there's also a big commitment that comes along with that.
Of course. So can you explain the job of the Board of Education and kind of like what a typical day is like, and maybe what the challenges are of being on the board? So really the board has 5 directives, but really we can talk about 3 because two of the elements are part of a third element, if you will. Really, the role of the board is to have a superintendent. We only have one employee, and that is the superintendent of the district. And having been on the board for a year and having an opportunity to just be involved with having Dr. Breggy just come on as our superintendent was a huge opportunity for this board in its entirety to do, and I'm very proud of our selection. And so really, Dr. Breggy in some way encompasses a lot of what the board is expected to do. The board sets vision for the district. It also adopts policy that supports that vision so that that vision can come to fruition, and also the budget. Adopts the budget and makes sure that we are operating in a very safe, conservative way so that we have longevity with our programs and our schools can thrive long term. So it's not just looking at the short term issues affecting our budget, but also long term. So those are really the 3 things: policy, facilities is part of that, and also bargaining, the bargaining contract, the unit, whatever we adopt as a board, we have to have good faith and move forward with it. So it's really policy, setting the vision, and then hiring a superintendent to do all these things. The superintendent manages. He leads with a vision that the board directs. I see. That's really interesting. I didn't know that was your guys' job, but what do you guys, I mean, you mentioned that there are these 3 factors that tie into hiring a superintendent, but how do you guys decide on who you think is the right fit?
For our superintendent?
Yeah.
Well, it's a collective experience with all 5 board members. It's not left up to one, but there has to be a cohesive element to that process because every board member wants the same things for the district. We all want the district to move forward. Right. And realizing, and you have the information that you have as a board member, both in public and behind closed doors, you understand the needs that need to be fulfilled in the district. And so it's you know, when you select an employee, in this case a superintendent, you look at the qualifications of the person, the background. It's a very thorough process, and again, this was a unique process in that it was in the middle of the school year.
Right.
But we were so lucky that we were able to find Dr. Breggy. I have total confidence in Dr. Breggy. I think anyone who is able to work by his side can quickly see the qualities that he brings to this district that I think are only going to benefit our students, our teachers, and our community at large. I'm very excited about this election that we made as a board. And I think that when we were in that room together, I can really say that there was something very positive and very exciting that was going on. And I think we all felt very pleased and delighted with our selection.
Well, I can tell you that the Beverly Hills High School Highlights actually ran an article profiling Dr. Breggy, and I was so impressed with everything that he stood for, and I thought that he was a perfect fit, and I really loved how they just they really wanted to explain to our students that he's here for the long run, and that was very comforting.
He's so connected to the needs of students, and he wants to connect with students, and I think that really came across everything that I read about him from his other experiences being a principal, a teacher, and a superintendent. And I'm hopeful that he will be able to transmit that and connect here at that level with our students as well. I think that's a very important part of a superintendent's job, and it's critical.
Right.
So for me, I think that's very comforting as a parent and as a board member.
Right. Well, I know that as a board member, there are certain things that you're not able to talk about regarding the Board of Education.
Sure.
Could you explain to me what are, the certain things that you're not able to talk about in public?
So there's really only three things that the board has to meet in closed session about, and that is litigation. Sometimes they describe that as being anticipated litigation, personnel, and negotiations with the union. Those are the three things really that we're not allowed to comment or to have opine in public about. And that's just not only true for Beverly Hills, that's true for any public school district across the state of California and the country.
Have you ever come across a situation where you are in an uncomfortable situation because someone's trying to get information that you're not allowed to share out of you?
Well, it's not uncomfortable, but we do have public comment, and that is an opportunity for the public to come and voice their opinion or statements made to the board about anything that is on our agenda, whether it be on closed or actually doesn't even have to be on our agenda, to be honest. But that happens sometimes. People come and speak, and I think sometimes there's a disconnect between the expectation that a board president should respond or a member should respond to something that was said, and that just can't happen. That's just not part of the rules of what obligates us as a board in public. So we can't respond. So I sometimes feel really bad when parents or people come before us and they want a response, and it's not a dialogue, so you can't have that.
Right.
We sometimes also, I think there's a lot of misinformation that gets out to the community ahead of time, and so the board can't respond or doesn't respond. That's a weakness I think that we have as a board that we are trying to fix. I'm hopeful that will lead to more transparency and more communication with the public, because it is a weakness in that there's so much rumor and sometimes misinformation that gets distorted, and so it's emotional sometimes for people, understandably so. I'm not criticizing that, but you're on the receiving end of it and you can't respond or engage. So sometimes that could be a little frustrating, but I understand that it's something that happens all the time and it's to be expected, and it's not personal. It's really just the way things sometimes take a form of its own.
Right. So what are the protocol for complaints?
Okay, so you're talking about like if a student has a complaint or a parent. So that's a great question. parents are really, if a parent or a student is having an issue with a particular teacher, let's say, they really should talk to the teacher about the issue or the concern and try to address those issues with the teacher, the parent, the student in the classroom. Sometimes that takes more than just one meeting. It can take 2 meetings, 3 meetings. And I think most of the time things are resolved. If for some reason the parent or the student feels that the issue at hand is not resolved, then I think at that point it's very fair for them to engage the principal. I would suggest having the teacher involved is always better than not. Open communication allows for everyone to understand what the issue is and to try to respond to that together. If at that point still the parent or the student feels that the issue hasn't been resolved, then you can ask to meet with the superintendent, the principal. But that's extreme. That usually never really happens, or hopefully I think most issues are resolved within immediately with the teacher.
Right. But
as they should be.
Yeah, exactly. But your superintendent is in place so that it doesn't have to come up to the board?
The board should never get involved until all of those issues have been, all of those protocols have been exhausted. And so parents, there is a natural tendency that if they know a board member, they just pick up the phone and call. But I think it's really important to hold the line to say, hey, you really should be speaking. Have you talked to the teacher, the principal, and as a very last resort, the board should then get involved. The board's not there to micromanage the everyday activities of what happens in the school or in a classroom.
They're there to instill the vision that they have for the school, and that's really exciting. And
it's a very critical part of what happens in our school district, and I think that sometimes parents don't understand how things so simply can be resolved with a teacher, and some do, and some of them have exhausted, and so it's totally fine to call and ask, and then I think you need to redirect as a board member.
Right. So do you have any plans for yourself in the future on whether or not you're going to stay on the school board, run for re-election, or do something else within the city, or?
Well, at this point, I've just been on the board for 1 year, and I will tell you that as of February of this year, I'm not sure if you're familiar with SB 415, but it allows for, or mandates, I should say, school boards and city councils to move their elections from an odd year to an even year. And so Beverly Hills Unified School District, our election is set for a odd year, or was set for an odd year, and so members of the board brought it up for discussion and for a vote, and the majority of the vote, majority of the board decided to give themselves an extra year. By consequence of that vote, my term doesn't end in 2019, it ends in 2020, so I get an additional year. So rather than running on a 4-year term, I'm now going to serve on a 5-year term. So for me, it's all very new. 4 years is quite a commitment. This last year has been quite a commitment. So I'm focused on resolving the challenges that we have now facing our district, and not so much about getting ahead of myself and having ideas of something that may that there's room to think for tomorrow. I mean, right now I want to focus on today and making sure that Dr. Breggy is successful in his tenure here. That to me is very exciting.
Well, it's very exciting that you're able to be on the school board for another year, just because you've helped the board in finding the superintendent, and I think that's really great. So what are the benefits of having the re-elections on an even year as opposed to an odd year?
So the idea behind that is that more people come out and actively participate and engage engage our elections process. And so that is really the idea. They have found that it's no secret that more people come out to vote during a presidential election than not. And those elections happen on even years. There's just more going on calendar on even years and odd years. Usually odd years are just local elections, and you have less of a group of people coming out to vote.
Okay.
So I will tell you, I believe that for the presidential election in Beverly Hills, there was 14,000 plus people who came out to vote, as opposed to the city council, I think there was 5,000.
Right.
So you could see the disparity in numbers.
Right. And, I think that Beverly Hills has tried to really make it a point to get the voters out to vote, because it is so important, because these are the people that run our cities,
Correct.
The school board members are the people that are helping instill what we want to have in our schools.
And I think it's important to point out that Beverly Hills is still doing better than other local cities. And so although we're not hitting those numbers as we are on the same numbers that we're hitting when we have presidential elections, we still have more numbers by far compared to other cities in the state of California. So that has something to do with the community that we live in.
Right. Well, speaking of Beverly Hills, what is your favorite part of the city?
So that's a great question, and I thought about that recently. In the words of former mayor and current council member John Mirish, I think what's wonderful about the city is that for many of us, it's home, and it's where we have our families, and from families we have, in a family is where a lot of the traditions and, whether you start traditions or continue traditions begin, and it's an exciting place I think home is very sacred. It's a great place for anyone, and we're just lucky that Beverly Hills is our home.
Yeah.
And it's a great community. It's a community for all of us who live here.
It is a really great community.
It is.
Well, thank you so much for coming on my show.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much for tuning in.
It's a really treat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia, and good luck to all of you.
Thank you so much.
Of course.